say that to be, self-degrading, but, Bethany has been doing FKTs much longer than me. She had a fitness level that was beyond mine. And so I've been working really, really hard all summer just to get myself to a place where I was confident that I was fit enough to pace her in a way that was beneficial, it wouldn't be burdensome, that I was actually, a legitimate strong pacer. And I am proud to say that I have gotten myself to that place. I've gotten much faster over the summer. I've really ramped up my training and my mileage, and I was proud of my ability to perform in that way. So that was really reassuring. But, there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and at the end of the day, you think you have a plan, and when the event starts, it just goes out the window, And I knew that was going to happen, and I was trying to mentally prepare myself for that. But until you do it, you don't know what it's going to look like. So
No.
My biggest thing was staying mentally flexible and adapting. And that was kind of the conversation that, I tried to have with the team ahead of time, was things are going to go wrong. And the key to success is going to be how well do we adapt to those things going wrong.
Certainly. There's a Mike Tyson quote I always like, which is, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And it's very applicable to, I guess, this and pretty much anything that anyone puts a plan on.
That.
Yeah.
So that's exactly how it felt.
So Katie, how many mountains did you pace with her, and how many miles did you put in? So Bethany completed 38 high peaks and 38 and a half. I mean, you got to the base of Allen. So actually, 38 and 3/4 really at that point. But how many miles did you personally put in?
So the original plan was for me to put in, I want to say it was like 55 or 60 miles. But what we found during the event was, it's no surprise, we thrive when we're together.
Sure.
And so as the event went on, what we realized was, Bethany was just really strong when I was pacing her. And I was able to really just keep her in an awesome headspace. So I ended up with, I think it was close to 80 or 85 miles in the end, in 15 high peaks.
All right. A big few days for you as well out there.
Yeah.
And how much sleep did you get as the support crew?
Not much. I think I totaled about 5.5 or 6 hours over almost 4 days. So that was a really interesting and kind of cool experience. I've never gone through sleep deprivation like that before, because I've never done anything like this before. And it was a big worry for me for future events, where I knew I was going to have to deal with that kind of scenario of not having much sleep and exerting myself. How am I going to deal with that? How is my body going to react? Am I going to be unable to perform, that kind of thing? And that wasn't the case at all. So it was actually a really cool experience to go through and just build that confidence level of, it turns out you don't really need that much sleep when your heart's invested in something. You just kind of keep going. And the only weird thing was on the last morning, because of the lack of sleep, I could literally feel my neurons not connecting anymore. I was trying to do simple math, and I couldn't have told you what 2 + 2 was.
Wow.
It was just one of those things where the neurons just weren't talking to each other anymore. And I was like, I know what I'm trying to do. I know what I'm trying to think right now, but it's just not happening. So, but the legs were still working great. So that's all that really matters, I guess, at that point.
Well, that's a plus. And I'm sure it was really good having Jay Whitbourne on your support crew, since I know he was on the support crew for Sarah Kai's last year. So he's been through, this exact thing. I imagine he was a huge help for the unknowns that you guys were out there experiencing.
Definitely. Yeah. I can't say enough good stuff about both Jay and Jason, who was our other main pacer. They were both absolutely incredible. Jay's the only reason I was still sane at the end of the event. He was just kind of the voice of reason and just an incredible athlete, no matter how many miles he put in. He hiked overnight with Bethany on the last night, and, he came into the aid station that we had set up at the base of Allen, and you would have never thought that he would had gone all night with her like that, so he was just calm, cool, collected, just, here she is, start tending to her feet. I'm just going to lay down in the dirt over here for a few minutes while you guys do that. get about 10 minutes of sleep, that kind of thing.
Sure.
So, and Jason was the same way, Jason and Jay were both with her coming in that last night, into the kind of little mini aid station that we put together there. And they were just ready to support her in any way that she needed. And, they were beat up and they were bloodied from the bushwhacks, and, they hadn't gotten any sleep, and they'd been hiking all night, and they both had, even more miles than I had on me. And they were just, everything was, here's Bethany, get her what she needs. We're going to do whatever we need to do to take care of ourselves. And we're ready to go up Allen whenever, whenever she's ready to do that. So I was so impressed with the way everyone came together.
Very cool. Now, Bethany, what was it like? Earlier you said, you're not used to this supported thing. You're used to being unsupported. It's me and that's it. What was it like being, the person being tended to? I imagine that was probably a weird feeling for someone like yourself.
Yeah, that's a really good question too, because it had phases for sure. In the beginning, it felt incredibly weird. Like when you're fresh and snappy and with it, I just kind of felt, I don't know, it's just a weird feeling of like, where's my pack? Like I should have this, or I have to ask, people for food or for this. And so that was kind of day one. And even getting into camp day one, I felt weird just being tended to. And it's like, oh, here's your tent. And it was such a nice effort. And I felt bad that I had these conflicted feelings on it, but I was like, I almost missed it just being Katie and I, like setting up our camp at night. And it's like, where everything is in your pack, and it has like a fondness to it. But that was day one. Come to day two, when you're starting to like feel the fatigue, especially more midday, it's like, I was thankful that I had people around me. And at that point too, I think just from feeling the support from our base camp people that night and all that they had packed in for me and what they had done for me, I just felt like I was lifted up every mountain. And it didn't feel hard. Like none of it felt hard hiking. I just felt this tremendous support around me. And that was nothing I've ever felt before. And it was beautiful. It was peaceful. And I was very calm and just enjoying it. Like I would have little celebrations on every summit, and I didn't look any further than one summit at a time. And I just focused on what was right before me, because I trusted my team, and I knew they were the best. And then by the end of it, that last push with Jay and Jason, I'll never forget that. It was a moment that, I've never experienced anything like it. And I felt like a child, being cared for by people, and so much love. And it was so hard to make the call to end it when I kind of knew what my pace was, and I knew what the FKT was, and I want to come back fresh for it next year. But it was really hard to make that call to stop, because you just feel that support at that point of like everyone's pulling for you and wanting you to get up and over the mountains. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds like it was like legitimately beautiful, based on your description of it. So that's fantastic. Now, going along with the you always have a plan until you get punched in the mouth. I'm going to ask you a question that I was going to save for after, but since you just started talking about it, I'll ask you this question now, which was, you just kind of touched on it a little bit, but what was going through your head, at what point did it first go through your head that you might have to call it so far into the game too? Like what was that dialogue inside your head? I imagine it was quite the battle going on.
Yeah, it was, so day 1 and 2 were pretty good. We were on pace, and day 3 we started on pace, and but so like that moment you talk about, James. It happened from Iroquois to Marshall. And I'm very superstitious. I'm a believer in a bigger picture and a bigger power. And so Jason brought me over the Mac range that night, and it was beautiful. It was, dark, and Jay had gone ahead and he had marked that the herd path, down the Shepherd's Tooth to Marshall. And he had lit it with like little glow in the dark sticks that we picked up and followed. And he had marked it so much. But then we got off the trail and you're not lost in the woods. You're just there in the woods because all you have to do is follow a bearing or direction and you can get to the trail again. But it really was costing us time. And then there was just like, Jason was behind me and he pushed on this tree and this tree fell, like this pretty big tree, and it almost hit me. And I just had this moment where I was like, gosh, I'm thankful I'm alive and this isn't going to happen. Like I just had a feeling then, because we were approaching the 24-hour mark to get the FKT, and I definitely wanted to be up and over Marshall by that point. And we just weren't hitting it. And before we had some communication trouble on the bushwhack from Big Slide to Porter. So we had just lost some time, and I was pretty at peace with it in that moment. And it's hard though, because then you go back and forth. And even when I got to the clearing at Allen, I slept for a little bit, but I woke up from my sleep in a panic because I felt the time, it was still running, and technically you still have time, but it's just not enough time. So I kind of woke the most startled I've ever woken. And it was a really unsettling feeling, but I think that was it. I think it was in the tent, and then I just started crying, and, Katie was there, and, she hugged me, and that was it.
Sure. Yeah, Katie, what
really
did you think in that moment?
Point. Yeah, I was concerned at that point too, because during the Unsupported, I had experienced just like some strange sensations in my heel that I had never had before. And it wasn't painful. It wasn't anything that bothered me on the last few days of the Unsupported. I kind of like kept getting this interesting sensation in my heel. And afterwards I had some pretty aggressive inflammation in my Achilles that I was dealing with for quite a long time, actually, that stopped me from training for a few months. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but what was happening was I was actually damaging my Achilles just because of the level of exertion and, just the climbing and things like that was putting so much pressure on it. And Bethany started to mention, she was getting the sensation and her Achilles, and that kind of set off alarm bells in my head, because I was like, I don't want her to damage herself, and have it affect her for whatever time period like it did me, and also not get the FKT along with it. So that was definitely a major concern that we were, kind of keeping in the back of our heads as well.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's a huge piece too, because we weren't far off the FKT pace, but with that sort of like creeping in injury, we didn't risk it. And it was from everyone's memory bank at that point with experience.
Yeah, sure. It seems like if you're not going to accomplish the time you're looking for, and an injury is mounting, then it seems like you made the absolute correct decision, because it's not worth an injury. It's never really worth an injury, but definitely under those circumstances. So let's hear the story. Let's go back to day one, back to some happier stuff. We found out kind of what you were going through when you had to call it. So let's start on day one now. Day one, August 2nd, 9 a.m.
Definitely.
You're at Giant Mountain. So Bethany, take us through your day. We'll go from your perspective, and then at the end of the day, we'll hear how day one went from Katie's perspective. the
Excellent.
support crew. So take us through it.
Yeah.
Day one. How'd it go?